Hello and welcome to Tax Matters. I'm Chiamaka Ohawuchi. You can see we are upbeat. There is cheery news in the air. The FIRS has done it again. The big news is that a whopping sum of 5.5 trillion naira was collected in the first half of the year 2023 by the FIRS. The Executive Chairman FIRS, Mr. Nami, announced this at the National Economic Council meeting held in Abuja on Thursday, 20th July 2023. This half-year collection report showed over 100% achievement of its target for the first half of the year. According to Mr. Nami, this feat was achieved in spite of the stubborn headwinds in the way of the service in the period under review, talking about currency redesign and the general election. Mr. Nami went further to say that the achievement was as a result of improved voluntary tax compliance by taxpayers, continuous improvement in automation of the tax administration process, as well as dogged engagement with stakeholders in both the formal and informal sectors. Mr. Nami concluded with the assurance that the service will perform better in the second half of the year and achieve greater results with the current government policies in place. Still staying with the FIRS. The FIRS has issued a public notice on filing of tax returns by enterprises in the Nigerian export processing zones and oil and gas free zones. The Federal Inland Revenue Service wishes to call the attention of the general public and, in particular, all enterprises operating in the free trade zones across the country on their obligations to file tax returns in accordance with industry-specific arrangements for carrying out taxing activities. This notice is also in furtherance of the subsisting Memorandum of Understanding between the FIRS, the Nigerian Export Processing Zones Act, and the Oil and Gas Free Zones Act. The FIRS, by this notice, further reiterates and directs affected enterprises to file their tax returns as follows. 1. Annual income tax returns, which shall contain audited financial statements, computation of income tax for the period, a true and correct statement in writing containing the amount of profit from each and every source, schedules showing the computation of profits arising from transactions carried out within and among the zones, in the customs area and beyond the customs area. 2. Monthly withholding tax returns, which shall comprise of a schedule. 3. Monthly VAT returns using the prescribed formats. And finally, tax returns are to be filed online via Tax Pro Max, and enterprises can obtain further assistance from the following tax incentives management offices, as can be seen on your screen. For broader perspectives, we spoke to Mr. Lucky Obodeke, the Director Tax Incentive Management Department at the FIRS. Mr. Obodeke, thank you for joining us on Tax Matters.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sir, we have in our hands a public notice on filing of tax returns by enterprises in the Nigerian export processing zones and oil and gas free zones. But we are under the impression that these enterprises do not pay taxes to the Nigerian government. Now, for the benefit of the general public, what is the purpose of this public notice? Please help us make a sense of this public notice.
Thank you very much for providing this platform that will help us to educate all the stakeholders on the importance of this public notice. Let me also state categorically that enterprises in the free zones enjoy tax exemptions, and those provisions still remain in the extant laws. Nothing has changed. However, in 2020 Finance Act, an amendment was made requiring enterprises in the zone to start filing annual tax returns. That is one leg to the amendment. The second leg is that there was a provision there that excluded them from legislative provisions from the federal, state, and local government level. That provision was removed. That also means that they are to also file returns relating to other taxes, withholding tax, VAT, more particularly. When the amendment was made in the 2020 Finance Act, the first step that FIRS took was to engage with the supervising authorities to sit down and look at these provisions and agree on the way forward. So FIRS signed a memorandum of understanding with both authorities. Remember that these enterprises have been out of the tax windows from 1992 till 2020. So it's a long time, and the processes and methods and ways of filing and they may not be too conversant with it. So working through the authority, FIRS started that process. Then we also had meetings, sensitization meetings with enterprises in collaboration with OGSA and NEPSA to educate them. And we are even taking this further. Tax education is a continuum. So FIRS is planning to meet enterprises at their various zones to also give room for them to ask questions that may help them to understand the issues involved. I know to some extent that there is some level of apprehension that, oh, FIRS is coming to collect tax. No, FIRS is not coming to change the law as it relates to the exemptions that they're enjoying. But anyone who is not entitled to the exemption can also not enjoy it. So the call by FIRS is just the normal routine thing that FIRS does, and all revenue authorities do it. Regularly, we call out to taxpayers to remind them to file their returns. The notices will tell them when to file, where to file, and if they have some challenges in filing, where and who to contact. Let me also use the platform to educate stakeholders on issues relating to tax at the free zones. We have about 5 major parties in the free zones. We have the investors, we have the enterprises, we have employees of the enterprises, we have suppliers to the enterprises, and we have also customers. And each of the 5, it is only the enterprises that enjoys this benefit. So within the environment of the free zones, you may have these 5 parties, and not all of them are entitled to the tax exemptions that are there. Employees, for example, employees in the free zones are expected to pay payee to the relevant state authority where they are resident or where the enterprise is located. And those who do businesses with the free zones who are not in the free zone, who are not enjoying their tax exemption, payments to them may attract withholding tax or sometimes VAT. The enterprises in the zones will only act as collecting agents for government. The incidence on those taxes are not on them.
Very well said, sir. Now, apart from all that you've mentioned, what other things do you require from these enterprises?
The enterprises are to send in their returns at the stipulated period. For corporate tax, it's once in a year. For withholding tax and VAT, once in a month. People will also ask, why do FIRS need the annual returns? These annual returns and all the returns that are submitted, apart from the fact that they may not be paying taxes in some of these instances, FIRS and government needs data to know what volume of transaction they have done and the taxes that are being forgone by government. Government want to know how much tax has been forgone through these exemptions. So the filings that they make will give us the basis of computing our tax expenditure figures.
Now, finally, as the Director, Tax Incentive Management Department of the service, what do you have to tell these enterprises to keep them abreast with what is expected of them?
First, they should understand that the exemptions that they are legally entitled to is still there. It has not been withdrawn. Government has not changed it. Secondly, it is their obligation to file returns promptly. And in doing so, they should also keep good records like every other corporate entity. And we also have our several channels of communication that they can reach FIRS. In fact, for purposes of ensuring that the reach is better, incentive offices are not in Abuja alone. We have in Lagos and we have in Port Harcourt, such that if they cannot reach us electronically, they can also reach us physically. And of course, we have our call center. Indeed, the atmosphere is much easier now because you can reach somebody through phone, through WhatsApp, through all the available means of communication. So our doors are open. Whatever questions that they have, they can bring it up. And frankly, some of them also do come up to ask questions. I do entertain inquiries from enterprises, and we solve it, and that's the way to go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lucky Obodeke. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you for staying with us. The administration and collection of taxes are guided by laws. In fact, next to policy. Legislation is the solid foundation on which tax administration rests. Apart from tax laws, tax administration is also guided by information circulars, public notices, decision of tax appeal tribunals and courts. For an orderly and sustainable development of the Nigerian tax system, the relevant stakeholders must collaborate. One key stakeholder in the Nigerian tax system is the judiciary. The judiciary is the body empowered to interpret tax laws and adjudicate on tax matters. It is also important that they are kept abreast of changes in tax legislation and other developments in the tax system. To this effect, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, in collaboration with the National Judicial Institute, regularly organizes training sessions for justices of the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the Federal High Court, and the National Industrial Court. One such session took place on Thursday, the 15th of June 2023. Theme of the interactive training conference was Challenges of Tax Administration in a Depressed Economy. 3 papers were presented. Honorable Justice Benedict Kanyimp, President, National Industrial Court of Nigeria, delivered the first paper on Assessment of Recent Judicial Pronouncements on Tax Issues.
There's no way you can talk about judicial decisions and not talk about tax avoidance, tax evasion, because the critical question as between the two role actors, the revenue as taxman, every other person as a taxpayer, has always been that tussle to be or not to be, to allow a tax scheme to go or not. And central to that question are us, judges, because via the instrumentality of statutory interpretation, it's within our powers to hold that a scheme falls within the law or outside of the law. I always thank the Federal Inland Revenue Service for bringing an opportunity of this sort, because when you read through some of the cases, one of the basic things we find is we have difficulty by judges understanding what is before them. If you read through the cases, each time, for instance, the court talks about assessment, very often it is a scheme involving avoidance or evasion, but very often treated as a question of assessment. One of the few things we were taught, for instance, was that it is tax evasion to even delay paying tax. The fact that you should pay today, you delayed it till tomorrow, is tax evasion, which is criminal. And why is that so? Because the value of what you are supposed to pay today is not the same with the value of what you will pay tomorrow if you take into account inflationary trends. So, payment as and when due is as critical as not paying at all.
Justice Kayim went further.
So, we can look at tax cases from three perspectives. One, are tax cases capable of legal analysis, given that most public discussion of tax law is framed in non-jurisprudential terms? The second question is, what exactly is the role of case law in tax law? If tax law is essentially statutory, does case law have a role? Thirdly, does tax law have wider significance? Beyond raising money, are there other purposes that tax law serves? The problem here is that lawyers often present tax law from only one angle, and that is the taxpayer's angle. Nobody seems to look at tax law either from the point of view of government or even from the point of view of society. Because if we look at it basically as a problem of the taxpayer, then it raises the contending issues, what is called the tussle between personal freedom and collectivism. So if you take those two things into account, then it's not just that we should transport the rules of interpretation. And what are those rules? A statute that is clear has to be given its ordinary and literal interpretation.
Mr. Kola Okonla of the FIRS delivered a paper on the benefits of VAT automation to the nation. This will come to you in a subsequent episode of the program. The third paper, which was on judiciary and taxation, recent developments, was delivered by Professor Abiola Sani, law lecturer and senior advocate of Nigeria.
Judicial officers are key stakeholders because the realist school in America believe that it's what you, the judges, say that is the law. So no matter what may be in the statute book, is the interpretation you place on it. But there are also rules on how they should be done. So judges are taxpayers, and they are also involved in resolution of tax disputes relating to other taxpayers, not themselves. So this I see as a unique taxpayers' education. So briefly, the Road Infrastructure Tax Credit Scheme commenced in 2019, and the legal basis was the executive order titled Road Infrastructure Development and Refurbishment Investment Tax Credit Order number 007. This framework is supposed to last for 10 years. And basically, what it is saying is that some companies who are eligible will be allowed to fix some roads, some public roads, or refurbish some public roads within certain framework, and then they can set off their future tax liability against the cost of the road. And the procedure begins with expression of interest, which will be reviewed by a committee, and then after the eligibility is approved, then they move to execution. After the execution, there will be a review of the work done, and then there will be tax credit certificate issued by the FIRS. A few companies had actually intervened in critical areas. There is Dangote Group relating to the road from Obajano to Kogi or Kaba. If you also look at the Apapa Oshodi Road all the way to Bagada, you'll see that it's an iconic road. And the list is growing. Transcorp is also mucking in. Then a few other NLNG is also part of the initiatives, and they are, I think so far they have done critical roads of about 20 national roads. The Mina and the Suleja Road is one of them. Then Naseni Levy. Naseni is National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure. If you Google Naseni, it was established in 1992, and you'll see that it has very desirable objectives. In summary, to fast-track our technological development, which is desirable. But due to poor funding or lack of funding, they had to think out of the box and say, how do we raise revenue? So they then, by Section 39 of the Finance Act, they imposed a Naseni levy of 0.25% of the profit before tax of companies in Nigeria. Some turnover, profit before tax, net profit. Then the last one, Nigerian Police Trust Fund levy. So it was established by the Nigerian Police Trust Fund Establishment Act. So they have always had this levy in their law, but they had difficulty enforcing it. So they also turned to the Finance Act again to impose a provision that will make FIRS the collecting agent.
A robust question and answer session followed the paper presentations. Earlier at the opening ceremony, Justice Salisu Garba, administrator of the National Judicial Institute, welcomed participants to the training conference. The President Court of Appeal, in her welcome address delivered on her behalf by Honorable Justice R.C. Abo, emphasized the need to keep judges abreast with current tax laws, which will equip them with the requisite knowledge in handling tax matters.
The Nigerian tax system has undergone several reforms geared towards enhancing tax collection and administration while minimizing enforcement costs. Revenue generated from tax has immense benefits to the economic development of the nation. The courts must consistently be proactive in handling tax matters to strengthen and deepen the rule of law as well as boost the economy, arming honorable justices with current tax regimes and discussing decisions of the courts in how tax laws are interpreted will enhance expeditious adjudication of tax-related matters.
On his own part, the Executive Chairman FIRS emphasized the need to bring tax offenders to book.
This interactive training conference is to bring the judiciary up to speed with the emerging issues in taxation. Tax administration has never been an easy task, especially in developing countries, where the demand for infrastructure and better living conditions overwhelm the capacity of government to provide the much needed impetus required for accelerated national socio-economic growth and development. The revenue challenges faced by developing countries such as Nigeria cut across a wide spectrum of instances, which also has connected relationships with the judiciary. From the need to block revenue leakages by ensuring that sanctions are meted to perpetrators of such criminality are commensurate with the crimes committed, to ensuring speedy dispensation of justice, especially on revenue matters.
The keynote address was delivered by Honorable Justice Kudirat Kekere-Ekun on behalf of the Chief Justice of Nigeria.
Certainly, this engagement will afford us the opportunity to reflect deeply on how best to rework the strategies that will underpin sustainable tax growth in our nation while reducing financial crime and its often painful negative effect on the lives of the citizenry. Over the years, the federal government has been consistent in amending financial laws, which have invariably introduced some notable changes to tax administration in Nigeria. These amendments are necessary to accommodate the speedy pace of technology global commercial changes, as well as provide solution in our precarious economic circumstances. My lords, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I dare say that we cannot underestimate the relevance of a functional legal system capable of proactively curbing the menace of tax evasion and related crimes. This implies that where recourse is made to a court of law, the courts must be properly equipped with the skill set and capacity to resolve differences timely and effectively.
To wrap up the training, a communique was issued. What is the essence of the judges' interactive training?
The tripod of taxation is law, policy, and administration. And without law, there's no tax. So the organ of government responsible for interpreting this law is the judiciary. And therefore, there's a need for us to always educate them, to bring them on board so that they will know about the recent development in taxation so that they can be properly guided. So right now, we are letting them know the state of Nigerian economy and the challenges we are facing, so that when they go back to their various organizations, they will give priority to tax matters.
With the training and retraining of judges on tax laws and regulations, expeditious adjudication of tax disputes is assured. Thank you for watching. See you next week.